We'll try.
And be professional.
Oh no.
I know, so we're especially this early.
Don't know what you're talking about. 11 a.m. is not a problem at all.
I was going to say something about that.
Yeah, well, no matter what time you pick, it's a bad time for somebody, I'm sure.
Oh yes, exactly.
Oops.
Give folks a few more minutes. Maybe one more minute. So we almost have everybody. Dan, do you know if Kim was going to make it this morning? I'll give her a minute if she wanted to join. All right, we got 11 people. I think that's good enough. And I'm impatient, so.
Right.
So we have a few things to cover today on the agenda. So one main topic, but we have a couple updates from Kay. So to talk about the town hall meeting, updates to the technical roadmap, and then Dan, if you have time to talk about the abilities document, which most of the stuff I don't think we need to spend a ton of time discussing, and then we'll kind of finish up with Lindsay's going to talk about the finalization and sort of what the process is going to look like for electing the final TAC, and what that's going to look like going forward. So with that, Kay, do you want to kick it off with town hall meeting?
Yeah, sure. So we will be holding a town hall meeting again in February. At our last quarter, we had it sort of. We're on a cadence where a couple of things. So we were on a cadence, started a cadence in the last quarter where we had a press release at the end of the quarter, and that was in October. And then we had a town hall meeting shortly following in the beginning of the next month. This quarter, things have changed just a little bit. Instead of doing a press release, we're doing a blog post, and that's because we want to kind of save our press releases for when we have big splash news. So we want to have a couple of new members, or a few important things that are happening in the technical committee. And this month we just didn't, or this quarter we just didn't have quite as much. So we're going to do a blog post, and then we'll retweet that. And the members of the TAC and the working group leads have all seen this and are familiar with it. The town hall meeting will be, and the town hall meeting we're going to delay just a couple of weeks rather than having it early in the month. And that's just because there's some other things going on at the governing board has an offsite coming up, and we just didn't want to be have too many things going on that early in February. So, but we did pick a date, and Lindsay, I think I didn't write down what that date was. Do you have it off the top of your head?
Yes. So the date that we had the most, I think, folks for was Monday, February the 22nd.
Okay.
My question was, I think we had held 2-hour blocks. The most popular block that was held was from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern. But I wanted to get an idea of what 60-minute window within that 2-hour block did we want to schedule the webinar for.
Oh, that's right. So we have, this is another thing, is last time we scheduled for 2 hours and we took just right around an hour and a half. This time I think we'll be fine in just 1 hour. So that's why Lindsay's asking. So I guess do we want it to be 1 to 2 or 2 to 3? That would be Eastern. I'm fine with the earlier time. I'm guessing well, let's see if maybe people want to take a second to check their calendars. And
I don't understand what you mean by earlier, Kay. Starting at 1, you mean?
starting at 1 or starting at 2.
Either works for me.
I think earlier might just be better for people who are international. I think that's something we don't necessarily always take into account.
That sounds right.
Great.
Okay.
So I will set it up for that, and I will get that link and everything added into the blog post that'll go out this week.
I'm sorry. When you say 1 to 2 p.m., what time
Eastern.
zone are we? Eastern. Okay.
Eastern.
Yeah.
Okay. I've learned to ask.
Yeah. Yeah. Good idea. Okay. And then the other item that I had is, well, any questions on that? All right. The other item I had is the technical roadmap. So I have done a little bit of pre-thinking on how we want to pull that together, and I wanted to share that with this group. And then from this, I will reach out to all of the working group leads and the other folks who said that they were interested in working on it, and start to fill in data for it. So let me share my screen.
Yeah, let me stop sharing, see if that helps.
Oh, or you can share it if,
Oh, well,
do you,
see.
the link is there, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, that'd be easier because I'm having trouble finding where the share button is at.
And I was switching between all these different apps. I'm like, well, where is it in this one? Okay, there we go.
Okay. So what I thought we'd do is, I think eventually what we'll want to be able, what we'll want to roll up to is to have kind of a matrix where we share by quarter the activities that we're planning to complete, organized by the vision pillar that it falls under. And so I popped some information in here, and these might not be right, but it was just to give an idea of some things that might fit in. So we had this discussion yesterday in the governing board planning committee about it, because it'll be working groups, largely working groups and projects that are doing the work, but we'll roll up by vision. And so I thought we might have the final roll up be what I'm showing on this first page. And then if you can scroll down, Ryan, we might do a process to work through it by starting first with each of the working groups and have them identify by quarter what their planned projects are. And then we can take this once we've got the working groups filling out the bottom part and then roll it up so that we're showing it by vision pillar.
Okay, you might ask the working groups to not only list those bullets, but suggest which pillar or pillars they map to.
Makes sense. Yeah.
You know, some just like 1, 2, 3, 4, or a letter, probably a letter or two after it.
Right. Okay. So down here we can have them. Yeah. So when we do it this way, we can identify the working group it maps to. That's what these initials were. So securing critical projects and identifying. I forget what that working group is, and I might have written that. Identifying security development. Anyway, and then down here it could be whatever. So.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if the metrics dashboard, yeah, 1 probably is.
Oh, it's not 1.
It probably should be
it's 2.
like, yeah, it probably should be like metrics, and then when you go up to the top. For some of these, it's kind of obvious, but for some of them might not be, just
right.
to make our life easier.
Right. Yeah. Good point. We can work through the details of that.
Right. I would suggest using words because I find it's really easy to forget to do a one-off.
Okay. Okay.
As someone who's made that mistake myself.
So I guess a question on accuracy and intention here.
Sure.
Do any working groups really know what they're going to be doing in like Q2 or even Q3 at this point? Like, what's
I
the goal of writing things down here?
you know, it's to get a sense so that we can, you know, share across working groups and with others. You know, this is not like, you know, we're an open source foundation. You know, we can't enforce that people do these things, but it's just to, you know, essentially just roll up a summary for everyone to see of what it is that we're planning to do. And we'll change this. I think, you know, quarter by quarter, we can, you know, plan on changing it out and getting more, you know, and putting in what we really did and being more accurate about what we think is coming up in the future. So it's not, it's okay if it's in my mind, if it's slightly aspirational. This is what we think we'll be doing, and then we update it as we go along. I think there's a lot of value in us having, but let me check. I think there's a lot of value in us, you know, having this summary that we can show to people that says, here's where we think we're going. Here's what we think we're working on over the coming year. And we have some of that down in the working group level, but it's, you know, if people want to see that summary vision, they have to, or they can't, you know, they have to go look around at each of the working groups, and it might be in meeting minutes. And this way we've just got it up front and center.
I do find it very satisfying looking at this table of the quarterly plans. Like, even if they change, having that projection is really exciting. I think it's inspiring to see.
Yeah, and I think it kind of serves two purposes. Like, one, for us that's already here working on it, it sort of motivates to see where we're going, and it helps us coordinate, you know, work that each working group is doing, and, you know, keeping things kind of on track in that regard. And then also it's just inspiration for, you know, people that might want to join up. They can see in one place kind of the work that's happening and who's doing it, and if they want to get involved, they know where to go and which projects to be involved in without having to go to every single one of the repos and, like Kay mentioned, you know, read through meeting notes and, you know, things like that. So I think it's very, very helpful.
Yeah, I
Just
agree.
maybe trying to fill it out for a couple of the working groups just to see what it looks like. I don't doubt the value in capturing what we're doing and what we're planning to do. I just think trying to break it down by quarter is a lot, especially going out a full year, seems a lot. It seems like there's kind of a disconnect between where the working groups, at least the ones I've attended, are at in terms of planning and what they plan on doing, and this kind of granularity. Like, I don't think I could guess off the top of my head what a single working group is planning to do in quarter 3 here. And I've been to most meetings of most working groups.
That presents a
Yeah.
good question. Is this going to be optional? Like, if groups are not projecting out that many quarters, can they leave those spots blank? And is that something that we're comfortable with? I would personally be open to that and like that.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Project.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. We shouldn't force people to fill in details that they don't have. It could be, like, to Dan's point, you know, once we get all the working groups together, maybe the breakdown isn't by quarter. Maybe it's more sequential for the year. We plan on doing these broad things, and here's kind of the order. Yeah, I think we just need to talk to the working groups to find out. I know in some sense, like the identifying security threats group that's doing the metrics dashboard and things, like, we have a general idea of what the timeline looks like, but it's not currently broken down by quarter. But I think that's just because we haven't had a need to think about it that way, and that's probably the case for a lot of the other working groups. But if it doesn't match, you know, we shouldn't try to fit a square peg, you know, into here if it doesn't make sense. But we should at least ask them and give them the chance and see if it does fit.
Great. And we're also not at,
Yeah,
I think we
would
don't want it to
agree.
be too granular. You
Yeah.
know, I think we want it to be sort of 1, maybe 2 bullet points per working group per quarter, something like that.
Yeah, I think.
But
it's
can we
really
just say,
high
like,
level.
short, medium, long term, like, to the point of, like, if we don't want people to fill in stuff that they're not certain about, if, you know, Q4, I don't think anyone's going to be certain about.
So that's a question. I had thought that this would be our 2021 technical roadmap, but I mean, we could, if we went short, medium, long, then you know, how long is long? Is that 3 to 5 years? You know, I had, you know, as we were thinking about the vision, that was kind of the 3 to 5 year, which covers the long term, and then I thought kind of the thing in the middle would be, let's try to be a little concrete about what we're doing in the coming year. But it doesn't have to be quarters. We can just say, here's what we're planning in the coming year. I kind of, and we could even break it down to, first half, second half. And maybe those things will come out as we're starting.
Reasonable. Yeah, like
Yeah.
Q1, Q2, and then just second half or something like that.
Okay.
If we're not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think having like the immediate granularity, yeah, like I said, Q1, Q2, and then just sort of and then here's what's next, but that's much more vague, much more high level. I think that's all right. And then when those quarters come into focus, we circle back and kind of update and provide more detail as working groups get closer.
Yeah, I like that one. One other comment on is also like if we intend to share this to the world, I think they're actually more interested about what the impact or outcome of the item, right? Versus a technically building API versus a specific technical. What does it mean for the community? Where do we capture that? Like maybe very simply, like this enables us to do this.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think
so maybe,
at the very least, I'd imagine each one of these things should link to the working group repos that have more details. But if we can fit it in here and it doesn't make this chart too busy, I think that works too. I would just worry that if we get a little too wordy in here,
yeah,
it look like a a dissertation rather than just a roadmap.
Okay. I'm just putting something in here to leave myself a note. Maybe we make these be sort of scenarios enabled, and then you can click on the scenario enabled, and then it describes, the technology that's coming to support that scenario.
Yeah, because
I can think more about that.
Are filling this in, they should have some information in their repos too. So we, like I said, at the very least, it should link to that.
Right. Okay. All right. Good thoughts. So, I think Dan's suggestion is good. Also, maybe we start with one or two working groups and, and work through it, and then we can roll out to others. Just to keep things a little more organized and efficient. The identifying security threats might be a good one to start with, and then Dan, does anyone want to volunteer another working group to be one of the first couple we try? We could do securing critical projects, or
I think best practices might be the closest, like with the scorecards and some of the trainings that they're doing. They might be the closest to actually having sort of a concrete plan.
Okay, I'll reach out to them.
And best practices badge too. And we have very specific things we're doing within quarters, but
right.
Yeah, I was kind of lumped all that together, but yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think the bigger challenge will be groups like security tooling, which right now is basically a discussion group. So I think they would right now be a blank row all the way across. This may be a forcing function to suggest, do you have anything specific you want to work on?
Yep, agreed. Yeah, because it seems like that group's kind of gone back and forth a little bit. So this could be a good way to sort of get pen to paper and see what their plans are going to be.
I can tell what their plans are now, but
Mm,
very short.
Exactly. All right. Any other questions about the roadmap?
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Kay. All right. So the next thing that we have, Dan, do you want to talk about the abilities talk real quick, or you want to review it? We just have a few minutes. I want to make sure we have enough time for the election process for Lindsay, but I don't want to
Yeah, this is just a quick FYI. The doc is there. It's in the pull request. I think a lot of people have looked at it. Phil just left a comment, I think 5 minutes ago, that I addressed, like a typo. This was a follow-up. Dan Middleton started it. I think he missed today's meeting, so we don't need to spend too much on it. But he started it in an issue. I turned it into a document here that we can eventually get merged. I think we have at least 3 or 4 LGTMs at this point, so we probably don't have to spend too much time here. But take a look soon. Once we get the 4 LGTMs, we'll get it merged. This is just a build up on the other working group lifecycle thing.
Cool. All right, sounds good. Yeah, so folks can take a look at that and then review it. That would be awesome. All right, so the next thing, Lindsay, if you're still here, talk about the election process that you've been working on.
I am here. I'm going to pop the doc into the chat. I also added it to the GitHub issue as well, where we were discussing the overall formation after bootstrapping of the TAC. And there's already been discussion around how many members and those pieces. So last week I met with David, Ryan, and Dan. So please feel free to also hop in here and clarify things. But what we wanted to come to consensus on, get folks input on, all of those pieces is the proposed makeup. Make sure that everyone did have time to look at that. And also looking at the proposed makeup was 4 members elected by the governing board, 3 from the technical initiatives. Does that still feel right and sound right to folks? Would we rather flip that so that we have 4 folks from technical initiatives versus the governing board voting? So please feel free to put feedback in there, thoughts in there. As you kind of scroll through, you'll see some suggested guidelines, which will adhere to what's already in our charter, but also just elevating that it's similar makeup to the governing board, that there won't be more than 2 folks from any company residing on the TAC or the governing board as it's related to voting and all of those pieces. And then also guidelines around voting for the nomination process for who will be on the TAC during the steady state process, that only one person, each person that's identified in this process only gets 1 vote, regardless of how many working groups they're involved in or anything like that. We want to make sure that that is equitable and fair during the voting process itself. And then scrolling down, there's just some decision points and things that we want to clarify around who is eligible to be nominated. How are we getting those lists? Is it just coming from working group leads? So just more clarity around and consensus around who is being nominated, who can be nominated, and how are we tracking all of that, just so that is very like out in the open and clear throughout the process. And then there's just some additional notes there about carrying forward with, do we keep the TAC chair in place, Ryan, for continuity, TAC rep in place, Dan, for continuity's sake, and like how do we think about that as we approach it? So this is really to get us started and launched into this process, and also to allow for our community to also share their thoughts and input here, so that it is very clear when we get to the voting exactly what's happening, how it's happening, and that it's inclusive of our community's thoughts. So I know I just said a lot. So I'm sure there are questions. You're welcome to kind of voice those questions now and or pop them in the doc as we go. And we'll continue to kind of talk through how this is done.
Apologies if I've missed this. My question would be, in terms of going from the existing TAC to a new TAC, is this something that we're totally refreshing on a recurrent basis?
So that is, so within the charter language, we can do this annually. However, that vote annually can be just for part of the TAC. It doesn't need to be the full TAC refreshed entirely, because we do want to continue to have that continuity sake on representation. Does that answer the question, or am I going like way too far off the rails?
So it's going to be staggered, I guess, to enable that continuity, and on an annual basis, we'll refresh like some subset of the members.
Yes, either by folks that are ready to step down or by a random process.
Okay. And we're thinking of doing this on the anniversary of starting the group, so it would be likely August timeframe.
Yes, we can run these elections concurrently with our other elections as well. So it's one process per year versus multiple election processes throughout the year.
Yeah, that seems great. Okay, thanks.
And Dan, Ryan, or David, if you want to add any additional comments, please feel free.
Yeah, I was kind of waiting to see if other people had opinions before I voiced my. Yeah, in general, I know I've mentioned this before. I was going to say, like, for me, that I like the idea of flipping the makeup from 4 members elected by the governing board and 3 from technical initiatives to be 4 from technical initiatives, just because the whole purpose of the TAC is that this is the technical advisory council, right? So the more from the actual contributors of technical initiatives, I think would be beneficial. Everything else I think is really good. I like the idea of staggering, the voting, making sure we have continuity throughout the life cycle of different terms, right? And so, other than that, I think this is a great start.
I echo Ryan's observation around. I prefer to see the 4 contributors to technical initiatives and then 3 from the GB. Just a +1 there. Did I understand you right there, Ryan?
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
And I appreciate your +1. Thank you.
So I guess when it'd be useful to ask, what would be the relationship between the leads of each working group and the TAC? I presume that the leads of each working group would meet with the TAC, and some of them will be part of the TAC. Am I, we're basically reporting up to the TAC? Am I missing something? That was my understanding when I read this.
Yeah, my understanding as well is that there's no formal relationship between leads and the TAC, but like personally, I think we should try to get them more involved and wanting them to be more involved with the TAC in general. But like you said, they may end up being a TAC rep, but it's not directly linked, is sort of my understanding.
Right. But I think we should lay the expectation that the leads will show up at TAC meetings and report to the TAC so the TAC knows what's going on. Is that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd like to see better, more involvement from that side and maybe a more regular cadence around at least reporting, how things change. And I know since we're kind of bootstrapping to figure out a lot of what this process is right now, but once we get this a little bit more solid, I think we should try to encourage folks to have a more regular attendance and things like that.
Yeah, one thought is if we're not really picky about the upper limit, as long as it's not really wild, right? Like, is there any reason why can't we make just like the leads be the TAC reps and then have additional few people outside that?
So this is kind of discussed on the issue there, the linked issue. The TAC, the size should be predictable, and coupling the leads to the TAC seats kind of introduces weird incentives and behavior around adding working groups and removing working groups and that kind of thing. We couldn't go that way. That was kind of the main alternative way to having this purely election-based system. But it's been just if we can go back to that issue, you might see some of the discussion on it there. I prefer this way where people are just elected rather than coupling it to working group leads.
Yeah, because I had the same idea originally as well, and then I think based on that discussion, I agree. I think this approach is a little better. There are some.
Yeah, my intention is not about the election or being a rep, right? It's more about how do we get them participate more regularly here. That was my plan.
Yeah, that's definitely an important point.
I like the question that Rao is raising here. I agree with Dan and Ryan's point around the perverse incentives and that we have to think carefully about how that plays out. But I would love to see us formalize a way for the working group leads, regardless of how many working groups we have, to have more active participation with the TAC, like maybe once a quarter or something, on a recurrent basis, they join the TAC for a meeting, and that meeting focuses on like the technical plans for that quarter for that group or something like that. I'd love to see them, if not formalized as members of the TAC, at least visitors to the TAC and in collaboration with the TAC on a more formalized basis if possible.
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. I know, I think I mentioned this before a few months ago. You know, we're bootstrapping now, so we got a lot of other things to figure out. But you know, previously in OSSC, we had this where there was a separate meeting just for working group leads that would get together. Like, I think it was like every 2 or 3 months. I can't remember. But that was very, very helpful. And I'd like to do kind of the same thing, like what you're saying, Jennifer, where the TAC meetings we should dedicate on a regular cadence, a meeting that is when working group leads come in, we get updates, we talk about where things are headed, and you know, just kind of keep everybody in sync. So if we could do that from a TAC level where we just know when it's coming, it's far out, that people can plan for it. I think hopefully that would help in getting a little bit better attendance for that.
I think we've talked about scheduling reviews, and I made a comment in the agenda about that too, if we should get started, about scheduling reviews for the working groups. We're supposed to do them initially, and you know, ongoing on like every 6 months or something basis, have the working group leads come and present to the TAC.
Yeah, that could be a great way to, you know, to kick this off, because I agree we need to do that as well. So if we start with that, that could turn into the cadence of, okay, let's get those guys ready with their charters, and then start reviewing them, and then set whatever the cadence should be thereafter.
If
I
we
think it's
do it as
important.
kind of a, excuse me, if we do it on a kind of a quarterly cadence, we can have it all wrap into our town hall meetings. So maybe, you know, maybe there's a review, and then the town hall meeting is, you know, a couple weeks after that. So they can reuse the same content for the review as for the town hall.
Okay, so there's 6 working groups now. If each one does a review in one TAC meeting, that's basically the entire quarter's worth of TAC meetings. Maybe that's fine, but
One thing I'd put forward is the question as to whether it's more useful to the TAC for it to be a retrospective or looking forward. We could do a review, and I think like in the town hall, it's been great to see the progress made. But personally, from the TAC perspective, I'd love to see these groups talking about what they're trying to accomplish next, in part because there might be some cross-group collaboration opportunities. There may be places where we want to offer feedback. So I'd be really interested in seeing it actually slightly different content from the town hall, just because I'd like to know kind of what's on the roadmap for them. But I'd love to hear others' thoughts on this.
So just
Yeah,
from
I
a
agree.
collaboration
I want
standpoint,
both. Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say from a collaboration standpoint, I think it's important for the folks coming in from the working groups to understand this is an advisory forum. It's not going to be something like a steering committee where, you know, you must do this or do that. So somewhere in this has to be, here's some advice, recommendations, but it's up to the community to ultimately decide yay or nay, or which direction they want to take this into.
Yeah, that's a great point, and maybe we need to be mindful of that in how we communicate this too. It's like we talked a bit about doing reviews, and that to me sounds a little bit like performance evaluations, which is obviously not at all the spirit of what we're looking for here.
So it's bi-directional essentially.
Yeah, it's a conversation. It's a collaboration and making things visible, and not us telling them what to do or anything of that flavor at all.
But I think it is definitely valuable to tell people we're planning to do X, and another working group says, "Oh wait, we're doing Y," and maybe they're overlap, maybe they can work well together. But I think at least something so that the working groups know about what the other working groups are planning is exactly what's needed.
Do you think this is the forum for that, David? Because would we not require all the working groups to be there?
I would, well, I mean, it's up to this group to decide that, but I think that the TAC would be a good place for that, unless there's as Dave mentioned, a separate meeting of all the working group leads. Unless there's one like that, I mean, the TAC's the obvious place to have that sharing between all the working groups.
Yeah, I think this is the right forum as well, just given the nature of it, and then the work that we're trying to accomplish by bringing those people together. So.
Yeah, +1 on that. I like the idea of having a cohesive technical forum where we have these conversations instead of a few different fragmented ones.
Yep, absolutely.
So then there would be an onus on those that represent the working groups to have some sense of what the other working groups are working on as well.
Well, I'd like to think the TAC is how they get that information.
Mm-hmm.
I may be wrong.
Yeah, I certainly think it's sort of the official way to do it. I would hope that there's a little bit more collaboration between groups. But yeah, I think if there's ever any question about coordinating and who's doing what, yeah, that the TAC is sort of there to help with that.
I like that phrase, the official version. I think that there's lots of unofficial, if nothing else, many of us are involved in more than one working group, but having one official way to make sure that if something gets dropped, it will it will be rediscovered seems like a good plan.
Yes.
Maybe we set up a TAC meeting, and let's call it on a quarterly basis, but it could be other than quarterly. It could be more if we wanted. But maybe we set up a slightly longer meeting and have all of the working group leads attend that. And we, in the way that we publish the videos for all TAC meetings, we perhaps label that one and make it easy to find if people want to see kind of where this stuff is going as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. When we did the leads meeting in the past, that's exactly kind of how it worked. It was like a quarterly-ish, and then I think we scheduled 90 minutes. We rarely needed the 90 minutes. I think maybe the first one we used, but after that, it was kind of like, yeah, everyone was pretty much done in an hour or so because it was just updates rather than painting that full picture for the initial kickoff. But yeah, if we timed it, I think if we, like Kay mentioned earlier, sort of syncing it with, either town halls or press releases, right? So maybe it was a few weeks before one of those major other milestones that people could kind of use that to talk and plan and just and sync up to some of these other dates. We could get on a good cadence that way.
I like it, working out in the open.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe we can even divide by the pillar, right? Like, because pillars, we're not going to change that often. Like, we have 4 pillars. Maybe that way, some working groups are more relevant for one pillar. They could come in. That way, having more working groups in future, not going to add more meetings.
Yeah, I think initially it might be good just to try to get everybody together. But if time becomes an issue, I think you're right. Some working groups are definitely more related than others. And so getting them in at the same time is important. So if we need to split them, I think that's a good way to do it. But I'd love to see get them all in there at once.
So I just want to call it a quick check. We're kind of getting away from the election process part here, and we do have a deadline to figure that stuff out, I think, in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Do we have any other open questions on the election stuff before we get into the working group reviews?
It's a good question. Do we have a well-defined end-to-end workflow for nomination and voting yet? Or should we work through some of the fine points of that?
That's some of the decision points of clarifying how are folks nominated, who can be nominated, and those pieces so that we can define that workflow. So I'm not sure if anyone has direct opinions on that. We were thinking initially, I talked about working group leads submitting kind of a list of folks who are engaged in meetings and doing things, whether it be on GitHub, mailing list, live on working group calls, those kinds of things to qualify folks. And then we would create an what's called an eligible list for voting from the technical initiatives.
I think you still need to have some sort of self-nomination. So you know, because it needs to be not just someone who's active, but someone who's interested in holding that role.
Yeah, to Kay's
Some-
point, I'd be strongly in support of self-nomination as well, just because I worry about doing too much gatekeeping in the nomination process.
Yeah, I was actually along those lines going to mention something around. I'm not completely convinced that we even need the criteria of like you've participated in other working groups. I wonder if that might come off as too rigid, because I think if you're not participating, people aren't aware of you and you're probably not going to get the votes anyway. So it might just sort of be an overly pedantic statement to try to filter people out. But I definitely second the desire to have self-nomination. But I do believe they should be general members of OpenSSF. I don't think we should have, because anyone can participate in the meetings, but I think as far as voting and things like that, they should be OpenSSF members.
And then I think clarity on just what percentage is required for carry forward, what happens in the case of a tie, those kinds of things as well.
Yeah, great point.
I'm imagining, Lindsay, there's probably existing groups that have decided a lot of those finer points as well that we could probably leverage.
I'm on mute. Yes, there are multiple processes that are out there for us to use that I can definitely draw from, but I also wanted to get our input too on it before saying like, here is the thing. So I appreciate the conversation that's being had here.
I think something else as well that I've experienced in other working groups, what happens as this starts to become more and more operationalized, can folks that have been on continue to be on? Is there, just for the sake of diversity, can others, like, is it like you can only be there for say 2 terms max or 1 term max or something, and then get others to kind of encourage inclusivity, participation, those kinds of things as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think there's sort of 2 sides to that, right? Like, I love the idea of having the diversity and getting different opinions in there. There's also an argument I think to be made for effectiveness and continuity. Maybe we could even have a limit around like, no more than 2 sequential terms, or something to that effect, or certainly not sold one way or the other, and definitely want to hear other people's opinions. But
Yep.
So just as a clarification, if we were to move forward with some form of nomination process, like let's call it self-nomination, but we might decide something different. We have folks put themselves forward into one general pool of TAC candidates. And then is it the case that the governing board, how are we going to allocate votes? Would it be that there's, we each have 4 votes, and whoever the 4 people are that get the most votes from the governing board get those 4, or if we switch it up, 3 seats? Like, we should figure out how we want to distribute the actual voting. And then for the TAC representatives, similarly, or sorry, the working group representatives, we should probably use an analogous form of voting. I don't know if there's one that we want to make use of by default that we've used elsewhere.
Lindsay, there's a couple voting systems we typically use, aren't there?
Mm-hmm.
For this kind of thing.
So there are a couple. So part of the thoughts there about like voting and when are technical initiatives voting, when is the governing board voting. So there's a piece there around, do we want to have governing board and the technical initiatives vote at the same process? Are we staggering the processes so that they make kind of better sense and it's cleaner to see like who's voting for what and when? So there's like that question. And then for the actual like voting process, as far as like who can vote, eligible voters, all of that, I will manage that along with input from you all in working groups. Did I miss any part of that question?
Yeah, isn't there a site that we often use, a website, and I'm trying to remember that.
Oh yeah,
that we use
we've used it before. OpaVote. Is that what you're asking?
OpenVote. Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, we would use the same one. We did that for the governing board seats that we voted for this year, or last year rather.
I'll post the opavote.com.
Mm-hmm.
I'll post in the chat.
Great.
So are we going to take all of this and the feedback and everything, and then eventually this will get incorporated into like part of the charter? Or where are we actually putting this specific thing? And the reason I ask is that then moving into the next part, given our timeline, how do we want to start doing this official review process? Because then eventually we go from ideas to, wordsmithing and, that kind of thing.
So there are components of this that just need to be voted on officially by TAC representatives that have that are able to vote. So that would be things like when we're starting the nomination process, that kind of thing. However, back to like the idea of like the terms and term limits, those are things that would need to be put into the charter. So there's a level of decision making that will happen right here in the TAC via voting. And then there's other things that would long-term affect the makeup of the TAC. So voting limits, those term limits, et cetera, that would need to go into the charter. So we'd have to kind of suss out those two pieces. And then we would work kind of separately to, one, get it written down, what folks vote on and what's approved in the process itself. And then things that would affect long-term term limits, et cetera, we would add those into the charter, kind of going through that legal process.
Okay, so with having multiple issues open, do we want to, or open questions, I should say, do we want to open separate GitHub issues for each one of those so that we can have individual discussions on these things, and then people can vote kind of like how we've been doing it, where we sort of approve a pull request or something of that nature for each one, and then those get incorporated in the final document? Or how would folks like to sort of handle making these last few decisions?
I like the GitHub issue idea.
You think we have enough of a shape now, Lindsay, that you can figure out what the final decision points are and turn them into issues we can discuss, or is it still kind of too ambiguous and vague?
Right.
So I think I could get it to a point. I think I will need just some support from Ryan and Dan just to like get these up there, just on the timeline that we're working on.
Not a problem.
And then I think GitHub issues is fine to use, but we'll also need to bring them into like a live TAC meeting and like record them in like the TAC notes, like what the votes are and if there were any objections and that. So that needs to be like a little bit more formal, like coupled with the GitHub issue feedback, just so that it is voiced during a meeting.
Okay, that sounds good. So I think what we could do is after this meeting, in the next, either today or tomorrow, soonish, we can start creating those GitHub issues, link them to this doc. We'll send them out, distribute out, via the mailing list and Slack, and then that way people can start the discussion. And then at the next TAC meeting, we can kind of bring everybody back together and we can go through the official voting if that's what we have to go to, but just see where we landed and then get it incorporated into the charter. Does that work for everybody?
Good.
That makes sense.
Yep.
I have, coming back to one of the items, so it was just striking me that having a separate vote by the governing board and then by contributors to technical initiatives complicates the voting process. And so I thought I'd step back and try to understand it. I don't see it written in this document. Why do we want to have a separate vote by the governing board? Why not let this be completely by the technical community?
So the
Or maybe
itself,
or maybe it's the governing board and the technical community. Anyway, I'm just wondering if we could make it more efficient somehow. Go ahead, Dan.
So the charter itself, I guess it's kind of up to interpretation. Lindsay, I think you copy pasted it somewhere in this document. Could you scroll around, Ryan, looking for the charter language?
I think it's at the top, isn't it? Or...
Yeah, probably. The charter language basically says that the TAC representatives need to come from.
I'm pulling the charter too, but essentially it's that there has to be a mix. So that the members, so basically you can't be on the governing board unless you're a member of OpenSSF. So there has to be a component of the TAC that is voted on basically by the members, and that's the governing board in this case. And then there's another group of folks that is from the technical initiatives that don't necessarily have to be members. But I'm pulling the exact language. I'm just trying to quickly describe
it. Just
it.
says that the TAC representatives need to come from the OpenSSF members and from the community. So an easy way to do that is to have the OpenSSF members elect some and the community elect some.
Or open the election so that both can be involved in it.
My guess is that if you ask the whole governing board, they're going to want to keep this, so the governing board gets to select some seats. But that's just my guess.
I guess I'm not strongly opposed to it. I just was wondering if we could simplify.
Does the charter say, just to clarify, one of those words there was that it has to be community members as in non-OpenSSF members, or that they can be? Like, are we reserving seats for community members?
They can be coming from the technical initiatives. They can be OpenSSF members or from the technical community for that vote.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll put a link to the charter in the chat too if anyone wants to take a look at that.
Any other questions about this? Well, we have about 5 minutes left before we start wrapping up. I think we have a good path forward as far as having discussion in the next 2 weeks before the next meeting. But is there anything else that folks want to talk about before we close out for the day?
Nothing here.
A small thing would be dates. So if the appointments have to happen sometime in August, I'm assuming that this would happen sometime in the early to midsummer, which means we have a decent amount of time to figure it out. It looks like we'll decide it well in advance of that.
Except that we need to decide it within 6 months.
Right. We have a date, an earlier date for deciding the process. And then when we actually run this election is open, I believe, for discussion. So I think we have the 6 month is the finalizing what the process is to finalize the elections. So that's this, and then that's in the next few weeks, I believe, sometime in February.
So are we on track with the current plan of opening the GitHub issue and revising, like revisiting to a vote next TAC meeting? Will that satisfy those criteria?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so if we get this wrapped up by the next TAC meeting, I think we're pretty good. So if we formally announced on August 3rd, so I believe that gives us we might be within, depending on how we want to define 6 months, if we include all of February as the 6 month mark, or if we're making it February 3rd. But either way, I think in the spirit of it, I think we're on track. Okay, so if there's other things we want to talk about, it was a great discussion today. So I'll go ahead and, Lindsay, let me know. I can work with you and we can get these things put up on as GitHub issues, and then we can continue the conversation there, and then we'll come back in 2 weeks and hopefully have this thing wrapped up.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll see you later and online.
All right. Thanks. Everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.